The groom's words at the altar turned the wedding into the bride's worst trauma. Emily Harrison felt her heart racing as she walked toward the altar of Sacred Heart Church in Phoenix. At 32, she had finally found the man of her dreams, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The guests smiled with emotion, her mother cried with joy in the front row, and everything seemed too perfect to be true. It was when Marcus Thompson, her fiancé of 3 years, took her trembling hands and began to speak words she never expected to hear. Instead of the traditional vows they had rehearsed together, he took a deep breath and said something that would make that entire moment of happiness crumble like a house of cards. "Emily, I need to tell you something before we get married," said Marcus, his voice trembling in a way she had never heard before. Emily smiled nervously, thinking it might be some romantic surprise he had prepared. The guests' murmurs began softly, but she still couldn't process that something was wrong. "My real name isn't Marcus Thompson," he continued, and the words echoed through the church like thunder on a clear day. "My name is Daniel Thompson, and I changed my identity 15 years ago." Emily's wedding dress seemed to have turned to lead. Her legs trembled, and she felt as if the church floor was opening beneath her feet. The guests' murmurs turned into muffled exclamations of shock. "What are you saying?" Emily managed to whisper, her voice almost inaudible. "I needed to tell you before we officially married. I can't live this lie anymore. I changed my name after my family's company went bankrupt and involved many people from our hometown. I didn't want you to know about my past because I was afraid of losing you." Emily felt the world spinning around her. 3 years of relationship, 3 years of plans, shared dreams, and everything had been built on a lie. She looked at the face of the man she thought she knew completely and saw a stranger. You lied about who you are all this time?" Her voice came out louder now, laden with a pain she didn't even know she was capable of feeling. Mrs. Margaret, Emily's mother, rose from the front row with a pale face. "My daughter, what's happening?" The priest, Father William, tried to intervene. "Perhaps it's better to talk in private." "No," Emily shouted, tears beginning to stream down her face. 3 years, Marcus, or Daniel, or whoever you are. 3 years of my life." She began to remove the rings from her hands, shaking so much she almost dropped them. "I trusted you with my whole life. I introduced you to my family, my friends. We planned our future together." "Emily, please let me explain." Marcus tried to approach, but she stepped back. "Explain what? How many other lies are there? Do you have another family? Other children?" The words came out in shouts now, echoing off the church walls. The guests were in complete silence, some still trying to process what they were witnessing. Emily's younger sister, Rachel, stood up and walked toward the altar. "Emily, let's get out of here," Rachel said gently, trying to reach her sister. "No, I want answers now." Emily turned to Marcus with a fury that surprised everyone. "You destroyed everything. You destroyed our entire life." She threw the bouquet on the floor with such force that the flowers scattered across the altar steps. "I never want to see you again." With those words, Emily lifted the hem of her dress and ran down the central aisle of the church, past all the stunned guests. Her sobs echoed as she fled from what should have been the happiest moment of her life. Marcus stood frozen at the altar, paralyzed, watching the woman he loved disappear through the church door. He knew he had made the biggest mistake of his life by choosing that moment to reveal the truth, but he also knew he could no longer live a lie. Mrs. Margaret approached him, her eyes full of tears and anger. "How could you do this to my daughter? How did you have the courage?" "Mrs. Margaret, I can explain." "I don't want to hear anything," she interrupted him. "You broke my daughter's heart on her wedding day. This is unforgivable." Emily's father, Mr. Robert, joined his wife. He was a man of few words, but his look said it all. "You are no longer welcome in our family." The guests began to get up and leave the church in small groups, murmuring among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Some looked at Marcus with curiosity, others with contempt. Rachel came running back into the church. She locked herself in the car and doesn't want to talk to anyone. She's in total shock. Father William approached Marcus. "My son, perhaps it would be best for you to leave for today. Let the family take care of her now." Marcus looked around the now almost empty church, with flowers scattered on the floor and chairs overturned. All that remained of his dreams of happiness were the ruins of his poorly calculated confession. He left the church alone, still wearing the green suit that Emily had specially chosen for him, carrying the weight of knowing that he might never get the chance to explain his reasons to the woman he loved more than anything in the world. Meanwhile, Emily remained in the car parked in front of the church, crying as if her whole life had ended. And in a way, the life she knew really had ended at that moment at the altar. Outside, the guests slowly dispersed, some still trying to understand what had happened. Among them was Mrs. Dorothy, Emily's grandmother, an 85-year-old lady who had lived long enough to know that situations are not always what they seem. She approached the car where Emily was and gently tapped on the window. "Sweetie, open up for Grandma." Emily rolled down the window, her face completely red from crying. "Grandma, he lied to me for 3 years. 3 years of my life." "I know, my dear, but perhaps there is more to this story than you imagine," said Mrs. Dorothy with the wisdom of someone who had faced many storms in life. "How can you say that? He deceived me." "Yes, he deceived you about his name, but in 3 years, did he deceive you about who he is as a person, about how he treats you, about the love he feels for you?" Emily was silent for a moment, processing her grandmother's words. "It doesn't matter anymore, Grandma. I can never trust him again." "That's okay, my sweet girl. You have every right to feel that way, but when the pain subsides a little, perhaps you'll want to hear his side of the story." Mrs. Dorothy stroked her granddaughter's face. "For now, let's go home. Your mother and father are waiting for you." Emily nodded, but she knew nothing would ever be the same. The trust she had built over 3 years had been shattered in a matter of minutes, and she had no idea how she could recover from it. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed the cancelled wedding, Emily locked herself in her room at her parents' house, refusing to speak to anyone. Mrs. Margaret would bring up meals, but most came back untouched. The silence in the room was broken only by sobs that escaped from time to time. Rachel knocked on the door several times a day. "Emmy, please open the door. We need to talk." "I don't want to talk to anyone," was always the same muffled reply. During this time, Marcus was desperately trying to get in touch. He called the Thompsons' house phone constantly, but Mr. Robert always hung up as soon as he heard his voice. He sent flowers, letters, but everything was returned or thrown away before Emily even knew. On the Thursday after the cancelled wedding, Marcus made a drastic decision. He showed up at the Thompsons' doorstep at 7 in the morning, determined to have a conversation. Mr. Robert opened the door and his face twisted in anger upon seeing him. "What are you doing here?" "Mr. Robert, please. I need to talk to Emily. I need to explain. You've already done enough damage. My daughter doesn't want to see you. I understand your anger, but she deserves to know the full truth." "The truth?" Mrs. Margaret appeared behind her husband. "The truth is, you lied to her for 3 years. What kind of person does that?" Marcus took a deep breath. "A person who was afraid of losing the woman he loves because of past mistakes that weren't her fault." "It doesn't matter," said Mrs. Margaret. "You had no right to make that decision for her." "You're right, I know I was wrong. But I love Emily more than anything in this world, and if I could turn back time—" "But you can't," interrupted Mr. Robert. "And now my daughter is destroyed because of you." At that moment, Emily came down the stairs. She had visibly lost weight in just a few days, and her eyes were red and swollen. When she saw Marcus at the door, her body trembled. "Go away," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "Emily, please. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." 5 minutes, she shouted, and all the pent-up pain exploded at once. "You had 3 years to tell me the truth, 3 years of opportunities, and you chose the altar at our wedding." "I know I chose the worst possible moment." "The worst moment?" Emily came down the rest of the stairs, approaching the door. "You humiliated our entire family. You made a fool of me in front of all our friends and relatives. It was never my intention to humiliate you. I didn't know how to tell you. So you tell me at the altar? At the most important moment of my life, Tears streamed down Emily's face again. You destroyed what should have been the happiest day of my life. Emily, let me explain why I changed my identity. I don't want to know, she screamed. The reason doesn't matter. You lied. For 3 years you looked me in the face and lied. Marcus tried to step closer, but Mr. Roberts stopped him. She told you to leave. Please, Emily. I did everything wrong, but my feelings for you have always been true. Emily stared at him with a mixture of pain and anger he had never seen before. How can I know what's true and what's a lie? How can I trust anything you say? Because you know me. You know who I really am. I knew Marcus Thompson. Daniel Thompson is a stranger to me. With those words, Emily ran back up the stairs, leaving Marcus standing at the door with his heart completely shattered. Mrs. Margaret closed the door in his face. Don't come back here. You've already done enough harm to my family. Marcus returned to his apartment, which now felt like a mausoleum. All the couple's photos, the honeymoon plans, the wedding gifts that had started to arrive. Everything there reminded him of what he had lost. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the living room armchair, looking at a photo of a smiling Emily, trying to find a way to undo the damage he had done. Meanwhile, at the Thompsons' house, Emily wasn't sleeping either. She stared at the bedroom ceiling, mentally replaying every moment of the relationship, trying to spot clues that he was lying that she might have missed. How had she not noticed? How had she been so naive? The humiliation burned inside, mixed with the pain of betrayal and the confusion of still feeling love for someone who had lied to her for so long. On Friday, Rachel decided it was time for her sister to leave that room. She entered without knocking, finding Emily still in her nightgown, looking out the window. Emmy, you need to take a shower and eat something. You're killing yourself like this. It doesn't matter, Emily murmured. No, it does matter. You can't let his wrong actions destroy you too. Emily turned to her sister, her eyes red. Rachel, I planned my entire life around him. Our plans to have children, to buy a house, to grow old together. It was all based on a lie. Emmy, I understand your pain, but you need to think about what to do now. Staying here, eating yourself up inside won't change anything. What do you want me to do? Forgive him and get married anyway? I don't know what you should do, but I know you need to get up and start living again, regardless of the decision you make about him. Emily was silent for a long moment. I burned all his photos last night. Rachel was startled. Emmy! I burned everything. Photos, letters, gifts, everything in the backyard. Mom was horrified, but I needed to do it. And how do you feel after doing that? Empty, completely empty. Rachel sat on the bed next to her sister. Emmy, can I ask you something? Of course. In 3 years with him, were you happy? The question took Emily by surprise. Of course I was. Why are you asking that? Because maybe that matters. Maybe his name was a lie, but the moments you lived were real. Rachel, how can you say that? Because I saw you together for 3 years. I saw how he took care of you, how he respected you, how he made you laugh. Was all that a lie, too? Emily fell silent, processing her sister's words. It was true that Marcus, Daniel, had always been affectionate, respectful, attentive, but did that matter in the face of the enormous lie? I don't know what to think anymore, Rach. I don't know anything anymore. Then don't think for now. Just take care of yourself. Take a shower, eat something, and we'll figure out the rest later. Emily finally agreed and went to take her first shower in 5 days. When she looked in the mirror, she was startled by her own appearance. She had lost weight, had deep dark circles under her eyes, and seemed to have aged years in a few days. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Marcus received an unexpected visit. His best friend since childhood, Brian Mitchell, had driven 2 hours from Washington after hearing what happened. Man, what kind of madness was this? Said Brian as soon as he entered the apartment. Brian, you have no idea how terrible I feel. Of course I have an idea. You just destroyed the most important relationship of your life at the altar of the church. What the hell were you thinking? Marcus ran his hands through his hair. I wasn't thinking. When it came time for the vows, I just couldn't say those words knowing I was living a lie. Daniel, my friend, Brian used the real name on purpose. You are one of the most upright men I know. But this was the dumbest decision you've ever made in your life. You think I don't know that? And now what's the plan? I don't know if there is a plan. She doesn't even want to see me. Her family hates me, and I can't blame them. Brian sat on the sofa, observing the apartment that looked like it had been hit by a hurricane. Tell me why you never told her the truth during these 3 years. Daniel sighed deeply. When we met, I had already had my new identity for 12 years. I had already completely rebuilt my life, and she was so perfect, so confident, so self-assured. I was afraid that if she knew about the company's bankruptcy, about all the shame I went through, she wouldn't want to stay with me. But man, you didn't give her the chance to choose. I know. And now it's too late. Maybe it's not. Daniel looked at his friend with hope. What do you mean? Have you tried telling her the whole story, the real reasons why you changed your identity? She doesn't want to hear me. And you? Have you tried other ways to communicate? Wrote a letter explaining everything? I wrote several. They all came back. Brian became thoughtful. What if you told the story publicly, in a newspaper, on the radio? Brian, that would only humiliate her even more. Or maybe it would show her and the whole community that you're not a con man or a criminal, that you're just a man who made a mistake for love. Daniel considered the suggestion. Perhaps total transparency was the only way to regain Emily's trust, but it could also be the final nail in the coffin of their relationship. That same afternoon, Emily decided to leave the house for the first time since the cancelled wedding. She needed to go to the bank to sort out some issues related to the wedding preparations that needed to be cancelled. When she arrived downtown, she noticed people's looks. Some seemed to pity her, others seemed curious. The weight of public humiliation became even more real. In the bank line, she heard 2 older ladies talking behind her. Poor girl. What a terrible man to do something like that at the altar. They say he must be some kind of criminal. Why else would someone change their identity? Emily felt her face burn. She turned to the ladies. Excuse me, ladies, but you're talking about my life, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't speculate about things you don't know. The 2 ladies were embarrassed and fell silent. Emily turned back around but noticed several other people had heard the conversation. The situation was becoming unbearable. When she got home, she found her mother in the kitchen crying silently while washing the dishes. "Mum, what's wrong, Mrs.?" Margaret turned around, trying to hide her tears. "Nothing, honey, just tired." "Mom, I know you. What happened?" "Several people called today asking about the situation. Some wanted to offer support, but others were clearly calling for gossip." Emily sat at the kitchen table, the reality of the social situation hitting her full force. "Mom, maybe I should leave town for a while." "Don't talk nonsense, Emily. This is your home, your city. You did nothing wrong." "But everyone is talking about me. Every time I go out, people will remember the wedding that didn't happen." Mrs. Margaret sat next to her daughter. "My dear, people talk for a while, then forget and move on to the next gossip. You can't let this drive you away from here. I don't know if I have the strength to face this every day." "Yes, you do. You're stronger than you think." That night, Emily couldn't sleep again. At 2 in the morning, she decided to go for a walk in the backyard. The night was quiet, with only the sound of crickets. She sat on the bench under the jaboticaba tree where Marcus had proposed to her a year ago. The memories came like an avalanche, him nervous, her surprised and happy, the ring that fit her finger perfectly. Had all that been real? His nervousness, the genuine happiness in his eyes, the way he hugged her when she said yes. How to separate the lies from the truth? Emily began to cry again, but this time the tears were different. They were no longer just of anger, but of deep confusion, because, despite everything, she still missed him. She still missed the late-night conversations, the movies watched together on the couch, the plans they made for the future. "Why did you do this to me?" she whispered to the wind as if it could hear her. On Saturday morning, a week after the cancelled wedding, Emily found an envelope that had been left under the door. It had no return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. Downtown Cafe 3 p.m. today. Please come. It's important. M. Emily stared at the paper for several minutes. Part of her wanted to tear it up and throw it away. Another part was curious about what he had to say that was so important. She showed the note to Rachel. What do you think I should do? Honestly, I think you should go. Not to forgive him or get back together, but for closure. To hear what he has to say and then decide how to move forward. What if it's a trap? What if he tries to manipulate me? Emmy, you're a smart woman. You'll know how to tell manipulation from sincerity. And besides, it's a public place. Emily spent the entire morning conflicted. At 2:30 p.m. she still hadn't decided. At 2:45 p.m. she was in the car, driving toward downtown, unsure if she would actually go into the cafe. When she arrived at the downtown cafe, she saw him through the window. Marcus, Daniel, was sitting at a table in the back, constantly looking toward the door. He seemed to have lost weight too, and his appearance was unkempt. Emily took a deep breath and went in. When he saw her, his face lit up with a mix of relief and hope. He stood up but did not approach, waiting for her to come to the table. "You came," he said as she sat down. "It doesn't mean anything. I came to hear what you have to say, and then I never want to see you again." Marcus nodded. "I understand, and I thank you for coming." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened between them. "Emily, I know you hate me now, and you have every right to. But I need you to know the whole story before you judge me completely. Go on then, but be quick." Marcus took a deep breath. "My real name is Daniel Thompson. I was born in Springfield. My family had a transportation company that did well for 20 years. Emily listened silently, her face impassive. "When I was 22, my father discovered the company's accountant had been embezzling money for years. By the time we found out, it was too late. The company was bankrupt, and we owed money to half the town. That doesn't justify lying to me for 3 years. I know, let me finish," Daniel continued. "We lost everything, the house, the cars, the business. But worse than that was the public humiliation. Everyone in town would point at us on the street. They said we were con artists, that we had deliberately stolen the employees' money." Emily noticed genuine pain in his voice, but tried to stay firm. "My father had a severe depression and was bedridden for months. My mother had to work as a cleaner to support the household, and I couldn't get a job anywhere because everyone knew the Thompson name and associated it with being a deadbeat. So you decided to become someone else." "I left Springfield with just a suitcase of clothes. I came to Phoenix and got a job at a small company. After a few years, once I was established, I officially changed my name to Marcus Thompson." "And your family?" Daniel lowered his head. "My father got better after the company was officially bankrupt and the debts were forgiven. They moved to a small town in the countryside and rebuilt their lives. I send them money every month, but I visit only twice a year, so as not to draw attention." Emily processed the information. "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning of our relationship? Because when we met, you talked about how you admired successful, honest people. You worked at the bank, you handled money, trust. I was afraid that if you knew about the bankruptcy, you'd think I was dishonest too. But you were dishonest with me. About my name, yes, but never about my feelings. Never about who I am as a person. Emily, I've loved you since the first day we met." That was never a lie. Emily felt the tears coming back but tried to control them. "How can I be sure? How can I trust anything you say?" "Because you know me. You know how I treat people, how I treat you. You know I never lied about anything except my name and my past. Marcus, Daniel, I don't even know what to call you. Call me whatever you want. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm the same person you met and fell in love with." Emily was silent for a long moment, wrestling with her emotions. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. At our wedding." "I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Emily, I chose to tell the truth because I love you too much to start a marriage based on a lie. I couldn't keep hiding it from you anymore." "You had 3 years to tell me." And I should have. Every day I thought about telling you, but I was always afraid. I always found an excuse to put it off, until the wedding day came and I simply couldn't speak the vows knowing I had lied to you. So you preferred to destroy me in front of everyone rather than tell me in private. Daniel closed his eyes, the pain visible on his face. It was the worst decision of my life. If I could take it back... But you can't. Emily got up from the table. Thank you for telling me the whole story, but it doesn't change anything. Emily, wait. No. I need to go. Thank you for the explanation, but it doesn't fix the damage you did. Emily left the cafe without looking back, leaving Daniel alone at the table with the feeling that he had definitively lost the woman of his life. When she got home, Emily locked herself in her room again, but this time she wasn't just angry, she was confused. Daniel's story made sense. It explained many behaviors she had noticed during the relationship, but never questioned. He had always been very reserved about his family and his past. He always changed the subject when she tried to learn more about his childhood or his parents, and he really had never lied about anything else. He was punctual, reliable, affectionate, but did that matter? Did the fact that the lie had a reasonable explanation change anything? That night, during dinner, the Harrison family had a serious conversation about the situation. "How did the talk with him go?" asked Mrs. Margaret. He explained why he changed his identity. His family went through a traumatic bankruptcy and he wanted to start over somewhere else. Mr. Robert frowned. "And you believe that story?" "I don't know, Dad. It makes sense. It explains a lot about his behavior during our relationship," Rachel chimed in. "Emmy, what's your biggest problem with the situation? The fact that he changed his name, or the fact that he didn't tell you?" Emily thought about her sister's question. "Both, but mainly the fact that he didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. And if he had told you at the beginning of the relationship, would that have changed anything?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, who had been quiet until then. "I don't know, Grandma. Maybe not. But at least I would have had a choice. So the problem isn't his past, it's the lack of trust." "Exactly." Mrs. Dorothy became thoughtful. "My dear granddaughter, I've lived 85 years. I've seen a lot in this world. And one thing I've learned is that sometimes people do wrong things for the right reasons." "Grandma, he lied to me for 3 years. And why do you think he did that?" "Because he was afraid of losing me. That doesn't justify it, but it shows he loved you so much he'd rather risk everything than lose you." Emily looked at her grandmother, surprised by the perspective. "Are you defending him?" "I'm neither defending nor condemning. I'm just saying situations aren't always as black and white as they seem." After dinner, Emily went up to her room, but couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. Had she been too rigid? Was there room for forgiveness? She looked at the table where a photo of the couple used to sit, which she had burned along with other mementos. She felt a pang of regret for having destroyed everything so impulsively. Emily picked up her phone and, for the first time in a week, checked the messages Daniel had sent. There were dozens of them, all apologizing, asking for a chance to explain, declaring his love. The last message, sent after the meeting at the cafe, said simply, "Thank you for hearing me out. I love you and always will, no matter what happens." Emily found herself crying again, but this time she didn't know if she was crying from pain, anger, or longing. On Sunday morning, Emily woke up with a strange feeling. For the first time in over a week, she wasn't feeling only anger. There was room for other feelings, and that left her even more confused. She went downstairs to have breakfast with the family and found Rachel reading the local newspaper. "Emmy, you need to see this," said Rachel, handing her the paper. In the classifieds section, there was an ad that took up half a page. "To the community of Phoenix. My name is Daniel Thompson, but for the last 15 years, I have lived as Marcus Thompson. I changed my identity after my family went through a difficult financial situation in Springfield when our transportation company went bankrupt due to problems with dishonest employees. I came to Phoenix to restart my life and managed to rebuild my career through honest work. During these years, I met and fell in love with Emily Harrison, an extraordinary woman who deserved more honesty from me. On the day of our wedding, I chose to tell the truth about my identity, because I could no longer live a lie with the person I love. I know my timing was terrible and caused unnecessary pain and humiliation for Emily and her family. I publicly ask for forgiveness for my mistakes and hope the community understands that sometimes good people make wrong choices for complicated reasons. Emily Harrison is a woman of integrity who did not deserve to go through this situation, and all responsibility is mine. Daniel Thompson, Marcus Thompson. Emily was shocked. He published this in the newspaper? It looks like it. And Emmy, everyone in town is going to read this. Mrs. Margaret took the paper to read. At least he's publicly taking responsibility for what he did. Mr. Robert shook his head. That doesn't change anything. He still lied for 3 years. Dad, but at least he's being transparent now, said Rachel. Too little, too late, replied Mr. Robert. Emily was torn. On one hand, she was touched by the public gesture of taking responsibility and protecting her reputation. On the other, she was annoyed he had made the situation even more public. Throughout the morning, the house phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors, friends, acquaintances called to comment on the ad. Some congratulated Emily for having escaped a liar. Others said they found Daniel's gesture courageous. Mrs. Patricia, a neighbor for over 20 years, appeared at the Harrisons' door. Margaret, can I speak with you for a minute? The two women sat on the porch. What did you think of that ad in the paper? Honestly, Patricia, I don't know what to think. On one hand, he's trying to clear Emily's name. On the other, he's making an even bigger scene. Margaret, I've known you all for a long time. I watched Emily grow up. I saw her suffer through previous relationships. And I can say one thing. I've never seen her as happy as she was these 3 years with Marcus. Or Daniel, whatever. Mrs. Margaret fell silent, knowing her neighbor was right. He was always respectful, polite, careful with her. He always treated you all with affection. Should one mistake, even a big one, erase 3 years of a good relationship? Patricia, he lied about who he was. But he lied about his name, not about his character. Have you ever seen him mistreat anyone? Have you ever seen him be dishonest in business? Have you ever seen him disrespect your daughter? Mrs. Margaret had to admit she hadn't. People make mistakes, Margaret, even good people. And sometimes the mistakes they make for love are more forgivable than the ones they make out of malice. After the conversation with her neighbor, Mrs. Margaret was thoughtful. Perhaps she was also being too hard on Daniel. After all, in 3 years of a relationship, he had never given any reason for distrust in any other aspect. That afternoon, Emily decided to take a walk alone through the city. She needed to get out of the house and think clearly, away from the opinions of her family and neighbors. She walked to the square where she had met Daniel 3 years ago. It was during a craft fair, where he was buying a gift for his mother. They ended up at the same stall, both looking at the same ceramic piece. "Sorry, you saw this piece first," he had said, smiling. "No, it's okay, I was just looking," she replied, also smiling. "How about we share it? I'll buy it, and we can stay here talking a bit to decide who takes it." They had talked for 2 hours, drinking coconut water and laughing at stories they told each other. In the end, he had insisted that she keep the ceramic piece. "To remember the day we met," he said. Emily smiled at the memory, but then remembered she had burned the ceramic piece along with the other mementos of the relationship. One more regret to add to the list. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. As she walked through the square, Emily was approached by Mrs. Helen, a lady of about 70 who attended the same church. "Emily, dear, how are you?" "Hi, Mrs. Helen. I'm fine, thank you. My dear, I read the announcement in the paper today. What a complicated situation." Emily sighed. "It really is. You know, dear, I've been married twice in my life. I was widowed from my first husband after 15 years of marriage, and I married again at 50. Emily didn't know where the conversation was going, but listened politely. "What I've learned all these years is that every relationship has its problems. Some problems are small, others are big. But the question you need to ask yourself isn't whether the person made mistakes, but whether the person you knew and loved still exists behind those mistakes. Mrs. Helen, he lied to me for 3 years. About his name, yes. But did he lie about how he treated you? about the affection he felt for you, about the values he showed in everyday life. Emily realized it was the same question Rachel had asked days ago, and one she still couldn't answer with certainty. My dear, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't forgive. That decision is yours alone. But I am saying that sometimes it's worth separating the mistake from the person who made it. Mrs. Helen said goodbye and went on her way, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. Emily Harrison sat on a park bench and watched the families strolling by, the children playing, the couples in love. Life continued normally for everyone, but hers seemed to have come to a complete halt that Saturday morning at the altar. She thought about the conversation she had with Daniel at the cafe. There was genuine pain in his voice when he told her about his family's bankruptcy, about the humiliation they went through. And there was real regret when he apologized for the way he revealed the truth. But was that enough? Was the love she still felt for him enough to overcome the broken trust? Emily returned home in the late afternoon, with more doubts than certainties. She found the family gathered in the living room, talking in serious tones. "What happened?" asked Emily. "Honey, Daniel's lawyer called here a little while ago," said Mr. Robert. "The lawyer? What for?" "He wants to return all the wedding gifts you received, and he also wants to pay for all the costs the family had with the preparations." Emily was surprised. "All the costs? All of them? The church, the catering, the flowers, your dress, everything. Why is he doing this?" Mrs. Margaret intervened. "It seems he wants to take full responsibility for the losses caused by the wedding cancellation." Emily sat on the sofa, processing the information. "How much money is it?" "More than 30,000 reais, said Mr. Robert. "Money we don't have to replace right now." "And are you going to accept, Dad?" Mr. Robert hesitated. "I don't know, honey. On one hand, it's money we lost because of his actions. On the other hand, accepting might seem like we're overlooking what he did. Dad, you lost this money because I chose to marry him. The responsibility is mine too." "Don't talk nonsense, Emily. You didn't know he would cancel the wedding at the last minute." Emily fell silent, reflecting on Daniel's gesture. It was a significant amount of money which could help her family a lot. But would accepting it be like accepting that he was trying to buy forgiveness? "What do you think I should do?" asked Emily. "The decision is yours, honey," said Mrs. Margaret. "We'll support whatever you decide. Can I think about it until tomorrow?" "Of course." That night, Emily had trouble sleeping again. Daniel's offer to pay for the losses showed he was genuinely remorseful and willing to face the consequences of his actions. But it also put her in a difficult position. On Monday morning, Emily woke up with a decision. She called Daniel's lawyer's office and scheduled a meeting for the afternoon. When she arrived at the office, she found Daniel waiting in the conference room. He stood up when she entered but did not try to approach her. "Emily, thank you for coming. I came because I need to clarify a few things about your offer." The lawyer explained the details of the proposal. Daniel wanted to reimburse all the Harrison family's expenses related to the wedding, including the wedding dress, the rings, and all the party costs. "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked Daniel directly. "Because my decision caused these losses. It's the least I can do." "Do you think you can fix everything with money?" "No. I know money can't fix what I did. But I can at least make sure your family doesn't suffer financially because of my mistakes." Emily studied Daniel's face. He really did seem remorseful, and the gesture, while it wouldn't fix the emotional side, showed responsibility. "I accept your offer, but on one condition." "What is it?" "I want you to donate the same amount to a charity. If you really want to take responsibility for your actions, do it completely." Daniel was surprised by the condition, but agreed immediately. "Done. And there's one more thing." "Tell me." "Once this is settled, I don't want any more contact with you. No calls, messages, visits, nothing." Daniel felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, but he agreed. "If that's what you want, that's what I want." The documents were signed, and Emily left the office feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief for having resolved the financial matter fairly, and sadness for having officially closed the door on any possibility of reconciliation. In the weeks that followed, Emily tried to return to her normal routine. She went back to work at the bank, where she was met with a lot of support from her colleagues. Some clients made comments about the situation, but most were respectful. Daniel kept his word and did not attempt to contact her again. Emily learned through mutual friends that he had moved to a smaller apartment and was avoiding going out much. She also learned that he had indeed made the donation to charity as promised. 1 month after the cancelled wedding, Emily received an unexpected call. It was from Mrs. Ruth, Daniel's mother, calling from Springfield. "Emily, my dear, can I talk to you?" Emily was surprised. "Mrs. Ruth, how did you get my number?" "I asked a friend of mine who lives there. Emily, I know you don't owe me anything, but can I speak with you for a few minutes?" Emily hesitated, but her curiosity was greater. "You can speak." "My dear, Daniel told me everything that happened, and I wanted to apologize for him hurting you like that." "Mrs. Ruth, you don't need to apologize for his actions." "Yes, I do, because I know part of the blame is mine too." "How so?" "When our business failed, we went through very difficult times. Daniel was just a 22-year-old boy, but he felt responsible for taking care of me and his father. He suffered a lot with the situation, and I think it marked him in a way he has never been able to overcome." Emily listened in silence. "Emily, in 3 years, my son talked about you every day. Every time we called, every time he visited, you were the main topic. I've never seen him so happy and fulfilled." "Mrs. Ruth, I know he made many mistakes. I know he shouldn't have hidden his past from you. But I also know he truly loves you, and he is devastated by what happened." Emily felt her eyes welling up. "Mrs. Ruth, it's very hard for me. I understand, my dear. I just wanted you to know that Daniel has always been a good boy, hard-working, honest. What happened to our family haunts him to this day, and maybe that's why he was so afraid of losing you. Thank you for calling, Mrs. Ruth. But I don't know if this changes anything." "It doesn't have to change anything. I just wanted you to know." After the call, Emily felt even more confused. The conversation with Daniel's mother had brought a new perspective on the reasons behind his lies. But did that justify what he did? That night, Emily spoke with Mrs. Dorothy, who was spending a few days at the family home. "Grandma, his mother called today." "And what did she say?" Emily told her about the conversation, including the details about how the business bankruptcy had affected Daniel. "Grandma, do you think trauma explains lying?" Mrs. Dorothy was thoughtful for a moment. "It doesn't explain or justify, but it helps to understand. My dear granddaughter, everyone carries wounds from something that happened in the past. Some people deal well with these wounds, others not so much. But that doesn't give me the right to trust him again." "No, it doesn't. But perhaps it gives you a different perspective on his reasons." "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever forgiven someone who hurt you very much?" Mrs. Dorothy smiled. "Several times, and sometimes I regretted forgiving. Other times I regretted not forgiving." "How do I know which is the right decision?" "You don't. You make a choice and live with the consequences. But one thing I can tell you, carrying resentment for the rest of your life is a very heavy burden for one person to bear." "But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, right?" "No. Forgiving means choosing not to let the resentment control your life. You can forgive and still decide you don't want a relationship with the person anymore." Emily Harrison thought about her grandmother's words. Maybe she needed to find a way to forgive Daniel, not necessarily to get back with him, but to be able to move forward with her own life. 2 months after the cancelled wedding, Emily finally felt ready to leave the house and socialize again. She accepted a friend's invitation to go to a birthday party. At the party, Emily had fun for the first time in weeks. She talked to new people, laughed, danced. For a few hours, she managed to forget all the drama she had been through. When she was heading home, she passed by the apartment where Daniel lived. It wasn't intentional, it was just the shortest route to her parents' house. But as she passed, she saw a light on in the window and felt a pang of longing. Was he doing okay? Was he managing to move on better than she was? Emily accelerated the car and headed home, trying to push those thoughts out of her head. The next morning, she received a call from Brian, Daniel's best friend. "Emily, can I talk to you?" "Brian, If this is about Daniel, it's just a quick thing, please, Emily sighed. Go ahead. He doesn't know I'm calling you. In fact, if he finds out, he'll be mad at me. But I'm worried about him. Why? He barely leaves the house. He's not eating properly. He's lost a lot of weight. And yesterday he told me he's thinking of moving to another city. Emily felt her heart tighten. Where to? I don't know. He said he can't stay here anymore because everything reminds him of you. Brian, I can't do anything about that. I know, I'm not asking you to do anything. I just wanted you to know. Why are you telling me this? Because you two were the happiest people I knew for 3 years, and now you're both destroyed. It seems like such a huge waste. After the call, Emily was unsettled. Knowing Daniel was suffering as much as she was didn't bring satisfaction, only more confusion. Were they both being too stubborn? Was there no way to overcome what happened and rebuild trust? Emily decided to talk to Father William, who had baptized her as a child and knew her family well. Father, can I ask you for some advice? Of course, my child. Tell me what's troubling you. Emily told the whole story, from the day of the cancelled wedding to the doubts she'd been having recently. Emily, can I ask you a question? Sure. If you had known from the beginning of the relationship that his real name was Daniel Thompson and that he had changed his identity because of his family's bankruptcy, would that have changed your feelings for him? Emily thought honestly about the question. Probably not. And if he had told you this story a year ago or 6 months ago, how would you have reacted? I might have been upset that he hadn't told me sooner, but I probably would have forgiven him. So, the problem isn't necessarily what he did, but when and how he did it. Yeah, I guess so. Father William was thoughtful. Emily, I've seen many relationships in my life. Some end over small things, others survive huge crises. The difference usually lies in people's willingness to fight for the relationship. Father, but how can I trust him again? Trust is rebuilt gradually, with consistent actions over time. It's not something that happens overnight. What if he lies again? That is a possibility you will have to weigh. But it's also a possibility that exists in any relationship. Emily left the conversation with the priest with even more questions, but also with a feeling that perhaps it was time to make a definitive decision about what to do. That night she sat down to write a pros and cons list about trying a reconciliation with Daniel. Cons: he lied for 3 years, humiliated me on the wedding day, broke my trust. How can I be sure there aren't other lies? What if he does it again? Pros: for 3 years he was affectionate and respectful. The lie had an explanation, not a justification, but an explanation. He publicly took responsibility. He is paying for all the damages. I still love him. Emily looked at the list and realized the pros and cons were practically tied. The decision would have to come from the heart, not from reason. 3 months after the cancelled wedding, Emily made a decision. She called Daniel. Hello? His voice sounded surprised and hopeful. Daniel, it's me. Emily, how are you? Can I talk to you in person? Of course. When? Where? Tomorrow at the same cafe where we talked last time, 2 in the afternoon. I'll be there. Emily hung up the phone with her heart racing. She didn't know exactly what she was going to say to him, but she knew she needed to have that conversation. The next day, Emily arrived at the cafe 10 minutes late and found Daniel already waiting at the same table as before. He looked anxious and hopeful. Hi, she said, sitting down. Hi. Thank you for calling. They stayed silent for a moment, the weight of all the past between them. Daniel, I've spent the last 3 months thinking about our situation. And what conclusion did you reach? That our story can't end the way it did. Daniel felt a flicker of hope. What do you mean? I mean that we need to try to resolve this somehow. Not necessarily get back together, but I don't know. Find a way to close this chapter properly. Emily, I would do anything to regain your trust. Daniel, answer me one thing with total honesty. Is there anything else about you or your past that I don't know? No. Absolutely nothing. My real name and the story of the identity change were the only secrets I had. Do you swear? I swear on the memory of my grandfather, who was the most important person in my life. Emily studied his face, trying to detect any sign of a lie. She saw none. All right, I want to try. Daniel couldn't contain his emotion. Emily, do you mean that... I mean that I am willing to try to rebuild our relationship, but with very clear conditions. Any condition. First, no romantic relationship for now. Let's start as friends and see if we can rebuild the trust. I agree. Second, total transparency about everything. I want to meet your family. I want to know about your finances, your friends, your work. Everything. No problem. Third, we'll do couples therapy with a professional. I don't want to try to resolve this alone. Perfect idea. And fourth, if at any point I feel you're not being completely honest about anything, no matter how small, it's over for good. There will be no third chance. Daniel nodded solemnly. I understand and accept all the conditions. Emily took a deep breath. Then, let's try. The two greeted each other with a formal handshake, but both felt it was a beginning. In the following weeks, Emily and Daniel began to meet again as friends. They met in public places, talked about various subjects, and slowly began to rebuild a foundation of communication. Daniel kept his word about total transparency. He showed Emily his bank statements, introduced her to all his friends and co-workers, and even took her to meet his parents in Springfield. The visit to Daniel's parents was especially revealing for Emily. She saw firsthand how the family had rebuilt their lives after the bankruptcy and better understood the trauma Daniel had carried all these years. Mrs. Ruth and Mr. George welcomed Emily with affection, but also with an apology for the situation. Emily, my dear, said Mrs. Ruth, if we had handled our situation better back then, perhaps Daniel wouldn't have felt the need to hide the past. Mrs. Ruth, the responsibility was his, not yours. Even so, we want you to know we fully support his decision to be completely honest with you now. Emily was touched by the family's kindness and began to understand even better the reasons behind Daniel's actions. During the couple's therapy sessions, many issues came to light. The therapist helped them both understand how past traumas, both the bankruptcy of Daniel's family and the loss of Emily's brother years ago, had influenced their reactions to the crisis. Emily, said the therapist in one session, can you tell me about how losing your brother affected your ability to trust people? Emily was surprised by the question. What does that have to do with our situation? Perhaps more than you think. You lost someone very important due to complications related to stress caused by lies, correct? Yes. My brother found out his girlfriend was cheating on him and lying about several things. It caused severe depression, and he started having health problems because of the stress. And how might that have influenced your reaction when you discovered Daniel had lied about his identity? Emily stopped to think. She had never connected the two situations, but now she realized her extreme reaction may have been influenced by the trauma of seeing her brother suffer so much because of lies. I think maybe I projected that experience onto the situation with Daniel. Daniel listened in silence, beginning to better understand why the revelation of the truth had caused such an intense reaction. That doesn't justify what you did, Emily turned to Daniel, but it helps explain why my reaction was so extreme. And Daniel, continued the therapist, can you talk about how the experience of public humiliation your family went through influenced your decision to hide the past? I think I was so afraid of going through that humiliation again that I preferred to lie rather than risk losing Emily. And now, how do you feel about having chosen to lie? Terrible. Because in the end, the lie caused exactly what I was trying to avoid. I lost Emily and went through public humiliation again. The therapist helped them both understand how their past traumas had created behavioral patterns that led to the current crisis, and more importantly, how they could break these patterns in the future. After 6 months of therapy and slowly rebuilding their friendship, Emily and Daniel decided to try a romantic relationship again. This time, everything was different. The foundation of communication was much stronger, Transparency was total, and both had learned to better handle their insecurities and past traumas. Daniel proposed again a year later, but this time it was completely different. It was in an intimate setting, just the two of them, and he began by showing all the documents proving his legal identity, his finances, and his complete personal situation. "Emily," he said, "last time I tried to start a marriage based on a lie. This time I want to start it based on the complete truth." He presented a folder with all the documents related to the name change, birth certificates, proof of financial status, and even letters of recommendation from people who had known him for years. "You don't need all of this," said Emily, laughing. "Yes, I do. I want you to know exactly who you are marrying." Emily accepted the proposal, and this time they planned a small, intimate wedding, with only close family and a few friends. On the day of the second wedding, held in the same church, but with completely different decorations, Emily felt a peace she had not felt the first time. There was no anxiety, no doubts, only the certainty that she was marrying someone she knew completely. When it came time for the vows, Daniel looked into Emily's eyes and said, "Emily, 2 years ago I made the biggest mistake of my life by revealing a secret at the worst possible moment. Today, I vow that there will never be secrets between us again. I promise total transparency, honest communication, and the courage to talk about anything that could affect our relationship before it becomes a problem." Emily, in turn, made her vows. "Daniel, 2 years ago, I learned that true love sometimes requires forgiveness, patience, and the willingness to rebuild what was broken. I promise never to let past traumas influence my ability to trust you again. And I promise that I will always give you the opportunity to explain before jumping to conclusions." When they were declared husband and wife, the kiss was full of meaning. It was not just the seal of a new marriage, but the celebration of having overcome together one of the greatest crises a relationship can face. The reception was simple but joyful. Mrs. Margaret and Mr. Robert, who had initially been Roberto's biggest critics, now treated him like a true son. They had seen during the months of rebuilding that he was truly a man of character, who had made a mistake out of fear, not bad faith. Mrs. Dorothy, now 86 years old, gave an emotional speech during the reception. "My dear grandchildren," she said, referring to both Emily and Daniel, "you taught me an important lesson over the last 2 years. You showed me that true love is not the kind that never faces problems, but the kind that has the courage to face problems together and come out stronger on the other side." The honeymoon was in Arizona itself, visiting historic towns. They wanted to stay in the United States close to family, celebrating not just the marriage, but also the roots they had almost lost. During the trip, Daniel showed Emily the town where he was born, before moving to Springfield. He told childhood stories, introduced her to distant relatives, and showed her places that had special meaning to him. "Why did you never tell me about these places before?" asked Emily. "Because I thought talking about the past would open a door I preferred to keep closed. Now I understand that closing doors to the past also closes doors to the future." Emily understood that the rebuilding journey had transformed not only their relationship, but also how each of them dealt with their own personal histories. When they returned from the honeymoon, they found a surprise. Friends and family had organized a second party for all the people who couldn't attend the intimate wedding. During this party, several people approached the couple to congratulate them not only on the marriage, but on how they had overcome the crisis. Mrs. Helen, the lady who had spoken with Emily in the square months earlier, approached the two. "You have become an example for many couples in our community. You showed that it is possible to overcome even the most difficult problems when there is true love and a willingness to grow." Brian, Daniel's best friend, made a special toast. "I saw my friend Daniel at his worst, destroyed, thinking he had lost the love of his life forever. And I saw Emily torn between love and disillusionment. Seeing you both today, more united than ever, gives me hope that any relationship can be saved if people truly want to fight for it." 1 year after the second wedding, Emily became pregnant. The news brought a special joy to the couple, who saw the baby's arrival as the definitive symbol that they had built something new and solid upon the ruins of what was almost lost. During the pregnancy, Daniel was the most attentive and caring partner Emily could have imagined. He had learned that showing love also meant showing presence, transparency, and care in every small detail. When Benjamin was born, the name chosen in honor of his paternal grandfather, Daniel cried in the hospital. "Why are you crying?" asked Emily, holding the baby. "Because 3 years ago I almost lost everything out of fear of being honest. And now I look at you and our son and see everything I could have lost forever." Emily held her husband's hand. "But you didn't lose it. And more importantly, we learned that true love isn't just a feeling, it's also choosing every day to be honest, to be present, to be better." Benjamin's baptism was held in the same church where both the cancelled wedding and the actual wedding had taken place. Father William, who had followed the couple's entire journey, made sure to mention during the ceremony how their story had become a testament to redemption and rebuilding. "This boy," said the priest holding Benjamin, "is born into a family that knows the value of forgiveness, honesty, and the work necessary to build solid relationships. He will have as an example 2 parents who proved it's possible to turn mistakes into lessons and crises into growth." Mrs. Dorothy, now 87 years old but still lucid and active, held her great-grandson with tears in her eyes. "My dear granddaughter," she said to Emily, "when you were destroyed in that room, I told you there might be more to the story than you imagined. Today I see I was right. Sometimes God allows people to go through storms so they learn to appreciate the sunshine." Daniel, who had developed a special affection for Emily's grandmother, approached the two. "Mrs. Dorothy, thank you for helping Emily see that people are more than their worst mistakes. My grandson, you proved that yourself. You turned the worst mistake of your life into the foundation for the best relationship you could have." 2 years after Benjamin's birth, the couple decided to renew their wedding vows once more, not because of problems but for celebration. They wanted to mark the 5 years since the crisis that almost destroyed everything, and the 3 years of solid marriage they had built. The renewal ceremony was even more special because it included vows that spoke about everything they had learned. Emily said, "Daniel, 5 years ago you broke my heart at the altar of this church. Today, at this same altar, I renew my commitment to you because I learned that broken hearts can be mended stronger than they were before." Daniel replied, "Emily, 5 years ago I almost lost you because I didn't have the courage to be vulnerable. Today I promise that our family will always be built on a foundation of truth, even when the truth is hard to speak or hear." Benjamin, then 2 years old, was in Mrs. Margaret's lap during the ceremony, and at one point shouted, "Daddy! Mommy!" for the whole church to hear, causing laughter and tears of emotion among all present. After the ceremony, the family gathered at home for a celebration. Emily looked around and saw Daniel playing with Benjamin in the garden, her parents chatting animatedly with her in-laws, Rachel telling stories to the cousins' children. Mrs. Dorothy, now almost 90 years old, approached Emily. "Granddaughter, are you happy?" "Very, Grandma. Happier than I ever imagined possible after everything that happened." "And did you learn anything from this whole story?" Emily thought for a moment. "I learned that true love isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of commitment to solve problems together. I learned that forgiving isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to let the past control the future. And I learned that sometimes the biggest mistakes of our lives can turn into the greatest lessons." "And Daniel, do you think he learned too?" Emily looked at her husband, who at that moment was teaching Benjamin to take his first steps in the garden. "I think he learned that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's courage. That honesty hurts less than lies in the long run, and that true love grows when it's nurtured with transparency." "And you two together? What did you learn?" "We learned that a relationship isn't built on people's perfection, but on people's willingness to grow together. That trust isn't something that either exists or doesn't. It's something built every day with small choices of honesty and care." Mrs. Dorothy smiled. "Then all the suffering was worth it." "It was, Grandma, because it turned us into better people and a stronger couple." That night, after everyone had left and Benjamin was asleep, Emily and Daniel sat on the porch of their new home, which they had bought a year before. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret telling the truth that day at the altar?" Daniel thought for a long moment. I regret the way I told it and the moment I chose, but I don't regret telling it, because living that lie was eating me up inside, and sooner or later it would have exploded in some way. And do you think if you hadn't told, we'd be happier today? No, I think we'd be living an illusion that would be discovered sooner or later, and when it was discovered, maybe we wouldn't have had the chance to rebuild that we had. Emily agreed. Sometimes I think the crisis was necessary for us to truly know each other. During the first 3 years, we lived in a romantic bubble. After the crisis, we had to learn to truly love each other with flaws, traumas, and everything. And today, do you feel you truly know me? Completely, and you? More than I ever imagined it was possible to know another person. The two fell silent for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night and appreciating the peace they had earned. Emmy? Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for proving you deserved that second chance. Daniel took Emily's hand, and they stayed like that, sitting on the porch, looking at the stars and reflecting on the incredible journey they had traveled together. 5 years after the crisis that almost destroyed everything, they had built not only a solid marriage, but a happy family, a community of friends who respected their story, and an example that it's possible to overcome even the most difficult problems when there is true love, a willingness to grow, and the courage to be vulnerable. The story of Emily and Daniel became legend in the city. Whenever a couple went through difficulties, someone would tell the story of the couple who separated at the altar and married again 2 years later, stronger than ever. They themselves began helping other couples in crisis, offering counseling based on their experience of rebuilding. Their stories became a source of hope for people who thought some mistakes were unforgivable. What would you say to a couple going through a crisis similar to the one you experienced? Asked a local reporter once, who was doing a story on relationships. Emily Harrison answered that true love isn't the absence of mistakes, it's the presence of forgiveness. That broken trust can be rebuilt, but only when both people are willing to do the necessary work. Daniel Thompson added, and that sometimes the greatest storms in our life are necessary to teach us to value what truly matters. Our crisis almost destroyed us, but it also taught us to love truly. The reporter asked, and for people who think some mistakes are unforgivable? The two looked at each other before Emily responded, some mistakes really do cause irreparable damage, but when the mistake comes from fear and not from bad faith, when there is genuine remorse and a willingness to change, it's worth trying. The most important thing is for each person to be honest with themselves about their own limits and capacities. And the most important piece of advice you would give? Daniel answered, never underestimate the power of honesty, even when it hurts. And never underestimate the power of forgiveness, even when it seems impossible. Years passed. Benjamin grew up, gained a little sister named Olivia, and the family became established as one of the most respected in the community. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real, because they had faced serious problems and come out stronger on the other side. Mrs. Dorothy lived to see her great-grandchildren grow up, and she always said her greatest joy had been witnessing the transformation of a crisis into growth. She passed away at 92, surrounded by family, at peace with the life she had lived and the lessons she had passed on. At Mrs. Dorothy's funeral, Daniel made a point of speaking about how she had been fundamental to the couple's reconciliation. Mrs. Dorothy taught me that wisdom doesn't come from never making mistakes, but from learning from the mistakes we make. She showed me that sometimes people do wrong things for the right reasons, and that doesn't make them bad people, just human. Emily, emotional, added, Grandma taught me that carrying a grudge is too heavy a burden for one person to bear. That forgiving isn't forgetting, it's choosing not to let the past control the future. And that true love grows when it's cultivated with patience, understanding, and honesty. Today, 15 years after the cancelled wedding, Emily and Daniel are known in town as a couple who prove that relationships can survive almost anything when there is real commitment from both sides. They created a family tradition. Every year on the anniversary of the day they almost separated forever, they have a private vow renewal, just the two of them, remembering the lessons learned and renewing their commitment to grow together. Benjamin, now 15, and Olivia, 12, grew up knowing their parents' full story. Not as a fairy tale, but as a real story of real people who made real mistakes and made real choices to be better. "Dad," Benjamin asked once, "do you still feel bad about what you did before the wedding?" Daniel thought carefully about his answer. "Son, I am very sorry for causing your mother so much pain and for the way I did it. But I don't completely regret it, because it was that crisis that taught us to love truly, to be honest with each other, and to build a family based on truth." Olivia, younger but equally curious, asked, "Mum, how did you manage to forgive Dad?" Emily smiled. "Honey, forgiving wasn't a single decision. It was a choice I had to make many times every day for a long time. But it got easier each time, because your father proved through actions, not just words, that he had changed." The children grew up with a mature understanding that relationships require work, honesty, and a willingness to forgive when necessary. They saw their parents face other challenges over the years: financial problems, family conflicts, differences of opinion, but always with the solid foundation of communication and trust that had been forged during the false identity crisis. When Benjamin started dating at 16, he had a serious talk with his parents. "Dad, Mom, I want to have a relationship like yours, but I'm afraid of making big mistakes like Dad made." Emily responded, "Son, you will make mistakes. Everyone does. What's important is to learn from them and be honest about them before they become too big." Daniel added, "Benjamin, the biggest mistake I made wasn't changing my identity. It was hiding it from the person I loved most. If you learn to be honest, even when it's hard, you'll already be ahead of where I was at your age. And what if I hurt someone I love? Then you apologize sincerely, work to fix the mistake, and prove through your actions that you've changed," said Emily. "But more importantly, you learn from the mistake so you don't repeat it." The wisdom that Emily and Daniel gained through their crisis became a legacy they passed on not only to their children but to the entire community around them. They started a support group for couples in crisis at the church, where they shared their experiences and offered hope to people who thought their relationships were irreparably lost. During one of these meetings, a young couple was facing trust issues, similar to what Emily and Daniel had faced. "How did you know it was worth fighting for the relationship?" asked the young woman with tears in her eyes. Emily looked at Daniel before answering. "We didn't know. We had to make a decision based on faith, not certainty. Faith that the love we felt for each other was real, even if the trust was broken." "And how did you rebuild the trust?" Daniel answered. "One day at a time, with small acts of honesty, consistency, patience. Trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures, but with small daily choices to be trustworthy." "And what if it doesn't work?" Emily and Daniel looked at each other, remembering how many times they had asked themselves the same question. "Then at least you'll know you tried," said Emily. "But if you don't try, you'll always wonder what if. And that's a much harder question to live with." The young couple decided to try, inspired by Emily and Daniel's story. 6 months later, they returned to the group to share that they had managed to rebuild their relationship. "You gave us hope when we thought there was none left," said the young man. "You showed us it's possible," said the young woman. Emily smiled. "We only showed that it's worth trying. The hard work was done by you." Stories like this repeated many times over the years. Emily and Daniel became symbols that relationships can survive severe crises when there is real commitment from both parties. When they celebrated 20 years of marriage, counting from the second wedding, they decided to throw a big party. Not just to celebrate the marriage, but to celebrate the journey of growth they had traveled. During the party, many people came up to tell them how the couple's story had influenced their own relationship decisions. Brian, still Daniel's best friend after all these years, gave an emotional speech. "I saw you at the worst possible moment. Daniel destroyed, thinking he had lost everything. Emily hurt and unsure if she could ever trust again. And today I see you as the strongest couple I know. You have proven that true love is not the kind that never faces storms, but the kind that learns to dance in the rain." Rachel, Emily's sister, also gave a speech. "Emily, I remember when you were locked in that room thinking your life was over. Today I see that In a way, your life really did end that day. But a better, more solid, more real life began in its place. Father William, now older but still active, made a point of being present and blessing the couple once more. You have turned this church into a place of hope. Every time I celebrate a wedding here, I tell your story to remind the newlyweds that true love is a daily choice, not just a feeling. During the party, Benjamin, now 20 and in college, prepared a surprise for his parents. He had made a video with testimonials from dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the couple's story. The video featured couples they had counseled, people who had been part of the support group, friends inspired by their journey, and even strangers who had just heard the story and decided to fight for their own relationships. "Mom, Dad," said Benjamin as he presented the video, "you always taught us that our story can be a blessing or a lesson for others. Today, I want to show you how many lives have been blessed by your courage to not give up on each other." Emily and Daniel watched the video moved, seeing the impact their story had had on the community over the years. After the party, when they were alone at home, the two sat on the same porch where they had had so many important conversations over the years. "Emmy, do you ever regret giving me a second chance?" Emily took her husband's hand, looking at the ring she wore, the same one from the second wedding, never replaced. "Daniel, our story taught me that there are no guarantees in life. I can't say I never had doubts, I never was afraid, that it was always easy. But I can say that every day I chose to trust you again, every day I chose to build our relationship with you, was a choice that brought more joy than sorrow. And today, how do you feel about our story?" "Today I see our story as one of the most beautiful things in my life. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. Because we showed it's possible to turn the worst moments into turning points for something better." Daniel was silent for a moment, processing his wife's words. "Emmy, there's something I never told you." Emily felt a moment of panic, but Daniel's calm expression reassured her. "What?" "On the day I revealed my identity at the altar, it wasn't just because I couldn't lie anymore. It was because in that moment, looking at you in your wedding dress, I realized I loved you so much that I would rather lose you by being honest than have you by being a liar." Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. "Why did you never tell me that?" "Because at the time I thought it was a very selfish justification. Today I understand it was the first time in my life I had the courage to choose truth over fear. And that's why we were able to rebuild everything. Because your confession, even though it came at the worst possible moment, came from a place of true love, not bad faith." The two embraced on the porch, under the same stars that had witnessed so many of their important conversations over the years. "Daniel, if you could go back in time and change anything about our story, would you?" Daniel thought seriously about the question. "I would change the timing and the way I revealed my identity. I would have told you much sooner, in private, more carefully, but I wouldn't change the fact that I told you, because that's what allowed us to build a relationship based on truth. And I would change my initial reaction. I would have tried to hear your explanation before making drastic decisions, but I wouldn't change the fact that I demanded total transparency afterward, because that's what ensured we rebuilt on a solid foundation. So in the end, our story is exactly as it should be, with mistakes, successes, pain, growth, and a lot of love." That night, Emily and Daniel went to sleep with a feeling of gratitude for the journey they had traveled together. It wasn't a perfect journey, but it was a real journey, one that transformed them into better people and a stronger couple. 25 years after the cancelled wedding, when Emily was 57 and Daniel was 60, they received a special surprise. Benjamin, now married with children of his own, had organized a surprise ceremony to renew his parents' vows. But this time, the ceremony was organized by the entire community that had been touched by their story. "Mom, Dad," said Benjamin, "you've spent decades helping other couples save their relationships. Now it's the community's turn to celebrate your relationship." The ceremony took place in the same church, but this time with hundreds of people present. Couples they had counseled, people who had participated in the support group, friends who had followed their journey, and even people who had simply been inspired by their story. Father William, even though retired, insisted on conducting the ceremony. "Emily and Daniel," he said, 25 years ago, you almost separated at this altar because of a truth revealed at the wrong time. Today, at this same altar, an entire community gathers to celebrate how you transformed that moment of near destruction into the foundation of an even stronger love. When it was time for the vows, Emily and Daniel looked at each other with tears in their eyes. Emily said, "Daniel, 25 years ago, you caused me the greatest pain of my life. Today I can say it was also the greatest gift, because it taught me the difference between fairy tale love and true love. Fairy tale love avoids problems. True love faces problems and grows through them." Daniel replied, "Emily, 25 years ago I made the biggest mistake of my life by choosing the worst moment to be honest. Today I thank God that you had the courage to give me a second chance, and that we both had the wisdom to build something better upon the ruins of what we almost lost." When they were declared renewed in their commitment, the entire church erupted in applause, not just to celebrate the couple, but to celebrate the hope their story had brought to so many others. After the ceremony, there was a big celebration in the town square. During the celebration, dozens of people approached to tell how Emily and Daniel's story had influenced their lives. An elderly woman approached the couple. "You saved my marriage. 10 years ago, when I discovered my husband had hidden debts from me, I was ready to separate. But I remembered your story and decided to give it a chance. Today, we are happier than ever." A young man said, "You taught me that being honest about my mistakes is not weakness, it's strength. That changed not only my marriage, but the whole way I relate to people." A middle-aged woman shared, "My daughter was going through a difficult time in her marriage and wanted to give up. I told her your story, and it gave her hope to fight for her relationship." Emily and Daniel listened to each testimony with humility and gratitude, realizing their story had become much bigger than themselves. During the party, Olivia, now 37 and also married, gave a speech on behalf of the family. "Dad and Mom, growing up in your house, taught me that love isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of commitment to solve problems together. You taught me that perfection doesn't exist, but constant growth does. And you showed me that sometimes the biggest storms in our life exist to teach us to value the sun." When the party was ending and the last people were leaving, Emily and Daniel were alone in the square, under the lights that were beginning to go out. "Emmy, when I left that church 25 years ago, I thought I had lost everything. Today I see I was actually ready to gain everything. And when I ran out of that church crying, I thought my life was over. Today I understand a better life was beginning." The two walked hand in hand through the empty square, remembering all the times they had walked those same streets during the different stages of their journey. "Daniel, can I ask you a question I've always wanted to ask?" "Of course. Deep down, very deep down, are you happy that everything happened the way it did?" Daniel stopped walking and looked directly into his wife's eyes. "Emmy, if someone offered me a time machine to go back and do everything differently, I wouldn't use it, because our story, with all its mistakes and successes, brought us exactly where we needed to be. It made us the people we needed to become, and it gave us a love that is real, solid, tested and approved." Emily smiled. "Then we are two, because our story taught me there is no love without risk, no trust without vulnerability, and no growth without discomfort." When they arrived home that night, they found one last surprise. Benjamin and Olivia had prepared a photo album with moments from the entire family's journey, from Emily and Daniel's first relationship, through the crisis, the rebuilding, the children, and up to that day. On the last page of the album, there was a recent photo of the couple on their home's porch, smiling peacefully, and a phrase written by their children, "To our parents, who taught us that true love isn't a fairy tale, but something much better, it's real." Emily and Daniel looked at each other and smiled. They had built something that was far more valuable than any romantic fantasy. They had built a true love, tested by time, strengthened by difficulties, and purified by honesty. That night, when they went to sleep, Emily said, "Daniel, thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth, even at the worst possible moment." Daniel replied, "Emily, thank you for having the courage to forgive me and for fighting by my side to build something better. And thank you for proving every day, for 25 years, that you deserved this second chance. And thank you for teaching me that true love isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. The two fell asleep that night with the peace of those who had found exactly what they were looking for. A love that was true, solid, and eternal, not because it had never faced storms, but because it had learned to dance in the rain. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Emily made the right decision by giving Daniel a second chance? We love reading your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.